Welcome to Integrity Talks, where we explore ethical leadership, responsible business, and sustainability.
Welcome to the Integrity Talks podcast, brought to you by the National Business Initiative. I'm Makhabule Rodi, and today we're exploring a subject that's critical to creating ethical, transparent, and trustworthy organizations: whistleblowing and the protection of those who speak up. Our guest today is Ben Theron, CEO of Whistleblower House, an organization dedicated to protecting truth tellers and ensuring their voices are heard without fear of retaliation. In South Africa, whistleblowers play a vital role in exposing wrongdoing, but it's not without significant personal and professional risks. Today, we'll unpack what whistleblowing means in our local context, the challenges whistleblowers face, the role corporates can play in their protection, and the reforms and partnerships needed to make our whistleblower system stronger. Ben, it's a privilege to have you with us today, and welcome to the Integrity Talks.
Thank you for having us. It's an honor to present to you today.
Okay, Ben, can you maybe just give us a brief introduction of yourself as well as the work that you do in the whistleblower space?
The Whistleblower House has been established in September 2021, and we opened our doors on the 22nd of February 2022. And so we've been helping whistleblowers since then. On average, we get 10 whistleblowers coming us per month, and to date, we've just got short of 400 that we are supporting in one shape, form, or another. Bearing in mind that we don't have 400 live cases on any daily basis because the target moves. So at any given stage, we have something like 20 people that need assistance at any given time. In the areas that we help whistleblowers are the areas that we help whistleblowers are the following four. Primarily, and 88% of people coming to us need legal advice. More often than not, they actually ask for legal advice after blowing the whistle because then they land in trouble at the workplace. And more often than not, they lose their jobs. So we have to help them through the process with the CCMA. We take them to High Court, Labour Court. We actually have one case at the Constitutional Court at the moment. So we've got various levels of legal cases across the country where we actually help people. We primarily service people in the country within the borders of South Africa. The reason for that being the legal environment in other countries are different, and we don't have lawyers in other countries. So we first want to establish our footprint in South Africa, understand the landscape properly, get our infrastructure properly before we go outside the country's borders. But we get requests regularly. We are the only organization on the continent that actually provides the services. So I've spoken about legal. The second one, and about 44% of people come to us and they need, not want, psychological help. When you are a whistleblower, you more often than not get bullied at work. You get suspended, you get disciplined, and then you lose your job. The stress on you and your family is huge, and it's always very difficult to cope with those things. In South Africa, where the unemployment is extremely high, it is more difficult in other countries to find a job. With a tag of a whistleblower on your back, it's even more difficult. And therefore, our whistleblowers come from CEOs in organizations right up to laborers, because across the board, this way and vertical, we have whistleblowers. And when you're CEO and you lose a job, it is extremely difficult to find another job as a whistleblower. The third area that we support whistleblowers is security. And very recently, the last few weeks, it's in the news where people are murdered. The prosecutor in the Eastern Cape murdered. The accountant in Ekurhuleni murdered. So across the board, across South Africa, people are being murdered because they just want to do their jobs. Security is an important thing. One of the things that we actually use is an Aura app. So it's an app that you put on your smartphone, and if you feel threatened, you press the button, and one of two things that you must choose, either security or health. So the closest security company to you will respond. So it's not company related or company specific. It is the closest response vehicle. If it's a health issue, you're under threat, you got shot, you're in an accident, you can actually ask for help. and then the closest ambulance will respond to you. So those are three. Lastly, and it's not a lot, we are an NGO, we've got limited funds, but what we do provide is a financial support. And what we find is that people lose their jobs and they can't find a job 6 months down the line, they lose their houses, and that adds to the stress that I spoke about earlier. And we provide a small stipend, survival stipend, 15,000 Rand a month for 6 months. And that is purely so people can apply for jobs. They can keep their kids in school, and they've got airtime to contact their loved ones. Those are the 4 areas that we support. It is critical that those 4 areas be boosted. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. That's our passion. We spend 12 hours a day doing that, and we love what we do. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Ben. So this is quite heartwarming and promising to hear, especially seeing how many people need whistleblower protection in South Africa and across Africa as a whole continent, seeing the rampant culture of corruption and unethical behavior. So just focusing on the South African context, what does whistleblowing really mean, and why is it important for the economy and society as a whole?
The whistleblowing legislation as it is today, which is called the Protected Disclosure Act, that's a PDA. It's been a while. 2 years ago, the Department of Justice published a thought paper, a paper wanting inputs from the country and individuals. We rewrote the complete act and we provided them with a fully written act. And we're waiting for that to be released. And it's a long process. Once they've approved the act as it is, it now has to go through the process through Parliament for approval. And our information is that there's a costing being done at the moment to find out exactly how much it costs. There are also questions internally at the Department of Justice where exactly this belongs. It sounds as if they are going to use the Special Investigations Unit, which is currently one of the most successful organizations fighting corruption in South Africa, and convert that into an Office of Public Integrity, an OPI, Office of Public Integrity, which will then include a portion of that in the whistleblower environment. We are now in conversation with the SIU as it is today to see how we can strengthen that, etc. You asked a question, what does whistleblowing legally mean in South Africa? The legislation is very specific that says there must be an employee-employee relationship for you to get protection. And you've got very specific individuals or organizations where you can go and report corruption. So it's very legislative, very prescriptive in terms of I must be employed by an organization. So I work for the Whistleblower House. So I must have a contractual work relationship with a Whistleblower House, and then I can complain inside the Whistleblower House if something is wrong. If you work in the public sector, the public protector is one of the people that you can go to. The MEC at the provincial level are one of those, and then the Human Rights Commission is another one. So those are just a few examples. Why is it important? Is we have realized, and the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners have actually published on this, is where the whistleblower is the most cost-efficient way to fight corruption. The whistleblower works inside the organization. They see something wrong. How they see that is they've got documentation. So when an investigator comes in and starts investigating the fraud that has now been reported, the whistleblower can provide the evidence. So it's a chain of evidence that can be passed on. The investigation is much easier. It's the most cost-effective way of doing that. We also regard the whistleblower as an early warning system for organizations. And in many instances, companies don't realize how important a whistleblower can be. And they need to understand the importance so that they can engender the right culture inside, so people feel free to come forward, they will be protected. But we'll come back to that just now. If somebody sees something wrong, and I'll give you a very specific example, 2 or 3 examples. If somebody sees something is wrong and they confront that, they bring it to the management attention, more often than not, that is the beginning of the fraud. And if you ignore that, the fraud grows. If you look at the Daybreak Farm scenario that's funded by the PAC, when the whistleblower, the head of accounting, came forward and said, there's 15 million rands worth of fraud taking place. They ignored her. they disciplined and they fired her. Today, Daybreak Farms are derelict. The SPCA did an investigation, and all the chickens there are starting to eat each other. There is no farm left. The value of the current losses is above 200 million, estimated to go to 500 million. 15 million was the time when they identified the fraud. Cynthia Stimple is a whistleblower in the SAA. She worked with me for the last 2 or 3 years. When she uncovered the fraud and she was fired for this, the contract that was supposed would have been signed off started off in 250 million, and they brought it down to 50 million. And they stopped it at 50 million. And even Cynthia speaks about 50 million rand being saved. What everybody forgets is that if that fraud was not stopped, the purchase of Boeings and aircraft would have gone forward. And that value is 20 to 30 billion rand, because that's the value of the purchase that was stopped. So the 50 million that we talk about. But the reality is, it's a 30 billion, 20 to 30 billion rand losses that would have incurred at that. So my message to organizations are very simple. Listen to whistleblowers. I want to clarify right now that what I'm talking about is a real whistleblower that sees something wrong and they want to expose it. You do get people, and those people approach us as well, is that we do get people that have done something wrong. And now they want to cover their tracks. And what they do is they come forward and say, there's something going on there. Meanwhile, they're part of that. And I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the real whistleblower that just wants to expose corruption. If somebody can do something about it, and I can then move on with my life. And typically, that's what a whistleblower wants.
Well, very eye-opening stories right there, Ben. And I think what the most prominent thing that you spoke about is about the economic and financial impact of basically corruption and the impact of whistleblowing in stopping that. I mean, these are very big numbers that you're speaking about. So just now focusing back on the whistleblowers themselves, what are the common fears and risks whistleblowers face once they decide to speak out? So as you said, you did point to a few whistleblowers, the work that they did, and just the amount of corruption that they uncovered. So now it's the time to speak out. So what are some of the common fears that whistleblowers face in that aspect?
Typically, when a whistleblower comes forward and exposes corruption, they go to somebody internally in the organization, and more often than not, they go to HR asking, I see something wrong. Who do I speak to? And typically in an organization, you would have a risk manager, somebody in charge of risk management. You would have somebody in an ethics environment, and somebody in the board, more often than not, who would be an ethics subcommittee. And those are typically the people where they go to. I'm hoping through this message and the podcast that we're talking to is that the company will understand the value of the whistleblower and then create the right, and we'll get to that just now. The whistleblower comes forward and just says, somebody's stealing petrol, somebody's claiming overtime where they shouldn't be, somebody's doing something wrong, theft is taking place. What happens is the company then wants to protect the company name. So I don't want this to get out to the public that there's theft in my company, so I clamp down on the whistleblower, as opposed to asking the whistleblower, please tell me more, give me evidence so I can address it. We don't do that. The company says, protect the name. So we shut the whistleblower up because I don't want the news to get outside that there's corruption inside the organization. Meanwhile, if they actually listen to the whistleblower, they actually attend to the matter, it helps the company to save money in the short term. That does not lead to bigger things. What happens to the whistleblower? We shut the whistleblower up. We bully him. We discipline him, suspend. We bring the company bring the company to disrepute. We take them and we put them to disciplinary processes. Sometimes we accuse them of stealing company property or leaking company information, making company information public. And then we discipline them and we fire them, suspend and fire. They then go home. Now they've got to fight from the outside. Meanwhile, they're a valuable employee that could have helped the organization. But they're outside in the cold. So now they've got to go CCMA, conciliation, they've got to go to High Court, to Labour Court, etc. the company still suffers because we have not attended to the actual problem that the whistleblower identified. So the employee is unemployed. That person must now fight for his own rights. The family is suffering because there's no income. Children get taken out of school, and the family unit started disintegrating because of the stress. And that's why we talk about psychological support. They get bullied. So the company head says, Ben is doing wrong. So what happens to my colleagues is they ignore me, they isolate me, they bully me. You are an impimpi. Meanwhile, they should be a hero. That's our position.
You're absolutely right, Ben, about the attempts by business and corporates to try and save face or save their reputation by basically isolating and punishing the whistleblower. So in an instance where a whistleblower finds themselves in that situation, how does the Whistleblower House support the whistleblower through these challenges, seeing that they have gone through the proper channels to report internally within the organization, but rather than getting help, they were punished, they were isolated, and basically are at risk of losing their livelihoods?
The whistleblower, I unpacked the 4 categories. We are trying to get the message across to the South African public and people that work for organizations, which is, please contact us before you blow the whistle, because then you can actually use the Protected Disclosure Act, the PDA, in the affidavit when you bring forward the malfeasance and you expose corruption. Because if you quote the PDA, based on the PDA, I'm exposing X, Y, and Z, the company is forced to protect you legally. Do they do that? No. But the point is, what the Whistleblower House does is we provide legal assistance to the individual before, if they come to us before and say, we know something is wrong, we want to blow the whistle, we want to expose, we will then provide them, because we have a panel of 12 attorneys that we provide service to the whistleblowers, and we appoint somebody for them. They help the person with the affidavit, and that affidavit gets given to the employer. So they are then protected under the PDA for what it's worth. I'm hoping this message will start the discussion in companies, where companies and senior people in the company will then acknowledge that whistleblowers have a role to play and start protecting them.
Thank you for that, Ben. And I do believe that the information that you're sharing now will be valuable to a potential whistleblower out there seeking assistance, seeing that there are channels for help that they can go through. So you did mention that the important role that leadership plays in whistleblowing, but according to you, what are some of the critical and practical steps a company or corporate can take right now to protect whistleblowers and make them feel safer coming forward and blowing the whistle?
More and more companies, and I'm hoping the MBI subscribes to this, more and more companies are supporting and adopting the King principles. The King principle speaks to having a whistleblower hotline and avenues available for whistleblowers to blow the whistles. It's important that companies adopt that. So that is just the beginning. That's not the end. So all companies ought to have a facility for somebody who knows something's wrong to in fact report that. And more and more people are making use of hotlines, and big companies, Deloitte, etc., have outsourced hotlines for, and they manage it for companies. You can have that. So you've ticked the box. What needs to happen is that the culture within the organization, and we are speaking about ethics today, and let's go back to that, not just the whistleblower. Ethics is the fundamental and the foundation that we need to put into place. And in South Africa, sorely, it's lacking from government, and more it just becomes more obvious that politicians have just become more and more corrupt. They're supposed to set the example. They're setting the wrong example. What we need in the organizations is where leadership, CEO, head of departments, whichever department you are in, whether it's HR, whether it's operations, they need to set the example that says, we need people to be willing and courageous enough to come forward and report wrongdoing. Because if the company suffers, and it suffers enough, we can actually go bankrupt. I've shared the example of Daybreak earlier. And it's important that companies understand the value of a whistleblower. So if they understand that, you create the right culture where you say, we embrace somebody who comes forward and speaks about wrongdoing. How do you do that? Is when somebody comes forward, and I'm not suggesting you expose somebody publicly unless they are willing, but if you reward, and it doesn't have to be monetary, it is you acknowledge whistleblowers and say, Mahabo is somebody who came forward, and she saved the company 10 million, 1 million, which could have grown to significantly more. And you publicly acknowledge the person that has come forward. You celebrate them. The company then changes, because as opposed to kicking somebody out that says that everything is wrong, you actually embrace them, you celebrate them, and you reward them. And part of our submissions to government is you actually start rewarding whistleblowers because they put their lives at risk. So create the right culture, very simply, by celebrating and rewarding whistleblowers.
Being a whistleblower is a daunting task, seeing the amount of harm or just physical or psychological harm that whistleblowers face when deciding to undertake the role of whistleblowing. And earlier in this podcast, you did mention some of the legislature that South Africa has in place to make the whistleblowing environment safer for whistleblowers to participate in. So as we can understand that it is not a perfect system, so where do you think are the biggest gaps in the whistleblower protections ecosystem of South Africa? How can these gaps be addressed, and who needs to be involved in making that happen?
My first response would be that organizations don't have to wait for legislation to be passed. Organizations, companies have the capacity to in fact do the right thing, to support whistleblowers, and not wait for the legislation to be passed that says you must do X, you must do Y, etc. A company has the capacity to say, we embrace whistleblowers. Our HR policy and procedures will provide for procedures for them to do forward. And if a whistleblower comes forward, we can, where appropriate, reward them for that. And when you talk about the 15 million rand saving, I'm not suggesting you pay them 5 or 10 million. You reward them by publicly acknowledging the good that they've done. You can give a portion of that. You celebrate them. And that sends a message inside the organization to the next person that says, wow, I get acknowledged if I show up, if I show the wrongdoing, because I saved the company money. Now, if you do that, you celebrate them, you reward them, and you give them a portion of the fund that you saved, it sends a beautiful message out. And if one company does that, the next company does that. Before you know it, whistleblowers are celebrated in Africa. We recently attended the South Africa Council of Conference, South Africa Council of Churches Conference 2 weeks ago, where the church took a decision that says all ministers, and now I'm talking about South Africa Council of Churches, but it's applicable to all religious organizations. All ministers in the South Africa Council of Churches umbrella will support whistleblowers. They will encourage them. They will protect them. They will provide them with mental assistance and guide them through the journey, and encourage the congregation to also support the whistleblower. That is what we need in South Africa. We need a massive turnaround in our ethical behavior. And the whistleblower in South Africa is an early warning system. It's an end of a process. Because if everybody acts ethically, everyone's Africa, whistleblowers are not needed anymore. Because we do the right thing every day, every minute. Then whistleblowers is like, who cares? Because we don't need them anymore. But because we've lost our ethical direction. That is why we need whistleblowers to bring us back.
Okay. You're absolutely right, Ben. And I think what I picked up, the most important words were ethics, ethical behavior, and behaving in an ethical manner. And in NGOs such as the National Business Initiatives, we also have a project called the Ethical Supply Project, which aims at mainstreaming ethics in the SMME supply chain. So we're hoping that through educating SMMEs about whistleblower protection, the importance of whistleblowing and ethical behavior in general, this can lead to a more ethical and sustainable business environment. So as I pointed out what we as the NBI do, what role what role does the partnership between NGOs like the Whistleblower House and organizations like the NBI play in building a safer and more ethical business culture? And how can these partnerships go beyond policy and actually have a real impact on people's lives?
You're very specific when you say ethical procurement, the process in the procurement environment. It's bigger than that. The organization must have ethical guidelines. We are very close. We work very closely with the Ethics Institute, and I'm hoping that the Ethics Institute will partner with you as well, because they are another very key organization to take the message forward, and they will guide you in terms of policies and procedures. The whole organization ought to be understand ethics. They should apply ethical behavior every day. So then the procurement is just a subset of that. The key is that if we are unwilling to allow corruption in any space of our organization, we start fixing South Africa. And if we fix South Africa, we start fixing Africa. If we start fixing Africa, we can fix the world. Fundamentally, we need to look at ourselves internally inside here as individuals, and then we start looking at the company that says, how do we change the ethic? How do we firmly have a foundation built on ethics and ethical behavior? Then we start moving in the right direction. The Whistleblower House stands ready to support the NBI in what we do. I'm quite sure the Ethics Institute, when we work closely together, will absolutely be eager to partner with the NBI to take this forward. Because every person that leads that right on the edge, every person who does that, every organization helps us shift the trajectory in South Africa to a better future for us and our children.
You're absolutely right. I think that collective action is important towards changing business behavior in society, to moving it towards a more ethical and trustworthy and transparent way of doing business. So, Ben, you did mention the amount of work and the number of whistleblowers that you are working with within the Whistleblower House, just to help them in navigating the whistleblowing journey and what they intend to do when they decide to be whistleblowers. So looking at the work that you're doing now and the initiatives that you're involved in, if you look ahead 5 or 10 years from today, what does an ideal whistleblower protection environment in South Africa look like to you, just taking into account the work that you're doing to make the environment safer and more accommodating for individuals and employees?
I would love the state to be able to say, I'd love to be able to say in 2 or 3 years' time that the Whistleblower House is not necessary anymore, because the state and the institutions, SAPS, Hawks, MPA, everybody else, having sufficient infrastructure, support, funding available to in fact do what we're doing. Because we've identified the 4 key areas that we spoke about earlier. We've identified those are the key areas, and that's what we propose to government that they need to work on. I'm hoping when they set up the Office for Public Integrity, the whistleblower environment will include those 4 categories. In addition to the 4, the rewarding of whistleblowers financially is critical, but that's part of the financial discussion that I had. We don't have funds to reward people. We just have the funds available to support somebody for the bare necessities. Now, the state has money, so it would be nice if money is recouped. 100 million rand is recouped. 5 million rand goes to a whistleblower and their family. That would be brilliant. You ask the question, in 5, 10 years' time, what would the whistleblower environment look like? I'm hoping that the ethics in South Africa would have reset. The African Council of Churches, when in the conference that we had, has taken a stand that says the corruption is not part of the church. We should fight it. Whistleblowing as part of that fighting of corruption is critical. And hopefully their inflection into government will be able to drive that and just make that 1, 2, 3 degrees where government start changing and start putting mechanisms in place to fight corruption. And if that starts taking hold, we can then move forward very rapidly. Thank you.
That's a very good answer, Ben. And I think that even though you hope that there won't be a need for the Whistleblower House. I think that everybody can agree that right now you guys are playing a very vital role in the whistleblower space and protecting whistleblowers. And I think that also, if any organization wants to just learn more about our work, they can obviously visit the Whistleblower House website, the Ethics Institute website, as well as the NBI website, where we do have a page dedicated to showcase the ethical supplier project and some of the outputs that came from it, which include a landscape research report, a tips and tales guide for SMMEs to navigate the ethics space, as well as a digital e-learning mobile platform app that they can use for self-learning and just self-paced learning for SMMEs in the areas of compliance, registration and authentication, whistleblowing, sustainability, diversity, equity and inclusion, and lastly, of course, the most important part, whistleblowing. So just any last words or any final parting message that you'd like to give to our audience before we can close off on this amazing podcast?
Whistleblowing is an early warning system. If you use it properly, you save millions by spending very little at the beginning. Ignoring a whistleblower report could lead to millions and billions getting lost depending on the size of the company. And the state-owned entities is a beautiful example of, if attention is taken right at the beginning, you could save billions and billions, and save South Africa billions. In closing, the Whistleblower House has been established for no other reason than to support whistleblowers. Anybody is welcome to visit our website. We have guides on all four the categories that we provide supporting, and those are legal, psychological, financial, and security, on how do you recover financially after losing your job. How do you make sure that you are secure? It's there. We've created how-to books, which effectively should be called the layman's guide to psychological support. What do you need to know to survive the psychological stress that comes with whistleblowing? The layman's guide for the legal environment. How do you blow the whistle? What are your rights? How to approach? Where do you go depending on the particular area that you work in? The layman's guide for security. The layman's guide for financial assistance. How do you recover financially? Because what happens is, very often people lose their jobs and they think, if the company understand I've just done nothing wrong, they'll bring me back. But they've lost their jobs and they think, wait. 6 months go by and they're actually then bankrupt. Whereas on day 2, after losing your job, you do an assessment of your financial situation. You can actually extend that 6 months to 2 years because you've got to squeeze every cent out of the money that you have. Thank you for the opportunity. The Whistleblower House is ready to help anybody who needs help. Whistleblowerhouse.org is the is the website, and we are ready to help people. Thank you for the opportunity.
Ben, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion for protecting whistleblowers. And I hope that the audience at large can understand how important whistleblowing is. Whether you're a small SME or a multi-million rand organization, whistleblowing is important, and having structures or channels within your organization for whistleblowers to feel safe to report any wrongdoing or unethical behavior is important. Channels that are anonymous and can make whistleblowers feel protected, seeing that there won't be any repercussions that will blow back on them should they decide to whistleblow. So your insights today, Ben, have not only highlighted the urgent need for stronger systems and protections, but have also reminded us that behind every whistleblower case is a person who has taken a brave step to speak the truth. And to our listeners, protecting whistleblowers isn't just about compliance. It's about building a culture of trust and accountability, whether you're a business leader, an employee, or a concerned citizen. We all have a role to play in creating safer spaces for truth tellers. And of course, as Ben mentioned, if you'd like to learn more about the Whistleblower House or how to get involved, you can visit their website, which is the whistleblowerhouse.org. And as an SMME, if you'd like like to learn more about whistleblowing in the context of doing ethical business in South Africa, please download the Ethical Supplier EC4B app and register to learn more. Thank you so much, Ben, for visiting us to speak about whistleblowing today, and on behalf of the NBI and the Social Transformation Unit leading the Integrity Talks podcast. Thank you so much, and remember that integrity grows when we protect those who decide to speak up against wrongdoing.
Thank you for joining Integrity Talks. Stay tuned as we continue to champion ethical leadership, responsible business, and sustainability. Visit nbi/integritytalks.org.za to explore, gain insights, and be part of the conversation.